Hello, this is Robert from Windy Corner TV with episode 6 of my podcast. This podcast has been in the works for a little while. I actually recorded this with Ben back in June, but due to a couple of events out of my control, this podcast has only been recently completed. So I hope you enjoy our discussions of Ender Lilies, Guilty Gear Strive, and Scarlet Nexus. So grab a beverage, kick back and relax, and listen to us talk about video games for the next 30 minutes. Enjoy! I think we'll kick things off with a game we've both been playing, Scarlet Nexus.
It's the weeb game of the year, without a doubt.
So, full disclosure, we both got a review code of the game. I played the Xbox Series X version, Ben played the PS5 version.
The PS5 version being superior because it's on the console that, actually has some games.
But the Scarlet Nexus is named in honor of the Xbox Series X codename Scarlet.
Oh, that's interesting. Does it actually have any specific ties to the console? Was there a reason they called it that?
Microsoft is doing the marketing for the game. If you look at any ads for the game, it just says it's coming to Xbox. In fact, Microsoft's been pushing it pretty hard in Japan. In fact, it's the first game that isn't made by Microsoft to get a physical release in Japan on the Xbox in 2 years. Rage 2 was the last third-party game to get a physical release on the Xbox.
So they actually want Japanese people to finally buy an Xbox. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. But jokes aside, it's a pretty awesome game. We've been playing it non-stop for the last week.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that's going to appeal to anyone out there that's a fan of anime, essentially.
So I guess we should discuss the actual premise of this game. What's the hell is going on?
So basically, there's these creatures called Others that are invading this kind of fictional Tokyo. That's what I would call it.
Yeah, the city's called Suo, but yeah, it's based in Tokyo. You can see the Tokyo Tower in the distance, but it's supersized.
Yeah, it's quite obviously Tokyo, just not the same name. And these monsters, basically, all they want to do is eat human brains. You play as one of two characters. So at the very beginning of the game, you can pick either a male or a female protagonist. And what's really interesting is that their stories kind of run in parallel to each other. I played as the female protagonist.
Which is Kasane.
Yeah.
And I played as Yuto.
And in talking with Robert, we kind of realized that the stories, while they are intertwined, you still get a very different experience while you play each of them.
Yeah, it reminds me of The Getaway on the PS2. When you play through the game, you play through the eyes of someone on the underbelly. Then you play through the game again, but through the eyes of the cop. So you see the same events again, but as one of the police at the London police force.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a game that really offers you an incentive to play through it again once you've completed it entirely.
And by RPG standards, it's not very long. It's about 15 to 20 hours, so it's not a huge time sink.
Maybe unless you sit through every single little piece of dialogue in the game, of which there is a lot.
So, yeah, the main storyline. So, the story starts out slow, but it suffers from something I call proper noun syndrome, where it beats you over the head with all this terminology.
There's so much.
All these characters. Now, the game does thankfully have a nice glossary where you can learn, look up all the characters and terminology, but it really just throws you in the deep end. It's like Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah, it's pretty full on.
But eventually you should get your bearings, and a couple of hours into the game, that's when the plot twists come in thick and fast, where seemingly no one can be trusted.
What I really liked about the game too was I kind of got the same feeling as when I played Fire Emblem Three Houses. So each character you play as, either the male or the female, you get assigned to a particular squad. And you're in control of this squad, and they have team members with particular traits. Some of them are kind of like anime tropes. Some of them are the big buff dude, or the kind of tsundere sort of character. And it really felt like Three Houses in the fact that you've got this sort of close-knit team that you learn more about the characters as you progress.
But it's no doubt the developers were inspired by Persona because you have the Bond episodes.
It's clearly the social links. Like, there is no doubt about it. They don't even try to hide it.
Yeah, so if you shower your comrades with gifts or engage in a chinwag, you will basically strengthen your Bond levels and grant you access to new abilities with them in battle. But this is definitely the weak point of the game is the side content, because the side quests really aren't that amazing. Just, NPCs just saying, go and kill this monster. Oh, I want to see this attack in action. And the Bond episodes are really snooze-inducing.
Yeah.
Like, it's 5 to 10 minutes of just nothing but waffling. Like, they just go on and on and on about nothing. It's not like Persona, where the characters had this deep dynamic where there's a lot of, like, character building and world building. You learn more about, like, for example, with Persona 4, you learn more about the inhabitants at Inaha. And each character has, like, various, backstories or their own conflicts.
Yeah, like they're really fleshed out. So it's not quite the case with Scarlet Nexus. And a lot of the time during like these little dialogue episodes, I would have felt bad if I skipped them entirely, but I basically just sat there on my phone while the characters talked in the background.
Yeah, pretty much. The only reason I think we haven't even sat through these is because we're reviewing the game and I was trying to get some good dialogue to use in the review, my video review. But yeah, if I wasn't reviewing this game, I would have just skipped them all. I know that sounds mean, but it just really wasn't that interesting. And it's not really that important to the main plot line, so you can just skip it and get, the abilities you unlock. So you can just hit, start.
Yeah.
So you hit start on the controller. Got a controller right here.
Well, let's not just tear Scarlet Nexus to shreds, though, because there is so much of the game that's actually really impressive.
Yeah, the gameplay is where this game shines the most. It's essentially a hack and slash game with RPG elements, not unlike Nier Automata and Astral Chain. I know a lot of people have likened it to Astral Chain. But the big gimmick in this game is the psychokinesis. So you can hold down the right trigger to throw like smaller objects. Well, they're not very small.
Like a car.
Yeah, cars, boxes, telegraph poles. But you can hold down the left trigger for a more involved telekinesis attack. But this takes longer, so you are temporarily vulnerable. But if you do this, you can unleash some really awesome things. Like in one level, like on the highway, you can jump on top of a bus and like just run down enemies and then slam it at the ground for this awesome explosion.
Yeah, it's pretty satisfying. Like some of those psychokinetic abilities, particularly when you're interacting with like environmental things, are really cool. And you can use them a lot during the boss fights as well to your advantage. Like the combat really does rely on heavy use of the psychokinetic abilities.
Yeah, because you have the standard light and heavy attack, and there's also a dodge and jump button. But the real meats and potatoes of the combat is learning the right moments to use the psychokinesis abilities, because your squad mates are also taken to battle and they have like unique skills. So with the Yuto campaign, one character, Gemma, he enhances your defense, so he like blocks or attacks. This is very useful for pulling off other moves. There's one character that increases your dodge ability. So this is great for getting the jump on enemies that have high defense or going through cage doors. One character has like a third eye that lets you see invisible enemies. And the other character, I think it was Hanabi. Yeah, Hanabi. Her fire ability enhances your attacks. And if you spray the enemy with an oil barrel, you light them up on fire and you get increased damage.
That is sadistic.
Yeah, so the idea is you want to use these properties, and there's also an ability you can unlock. So you can get experience points, and it can be used to unlock new move sets. And one useful ability is being able to use multiple psychokinesis attacks at the same time. Because when you start out, you can only use one of your comrades, but if you unlock the ability to use up to 4, all of them, you can do some pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's where the combat really got interesting. Once I unlocked the ability to use multiple of my teammates' skills at once, like I could activate like hyper speed, turn invisible, run up behind a character and backstab them for like a one-hit KO. And that sort of combat is just so awesome.
Yeah. So it's really good. Yeah, so you got the combination of your squad mates, there's the strategy element, and you got all these abilities you're constantly unlocking through the brain map, which you put experience points in, and of course the abilities you unlock through the Bond episodes. So it just never seems to get boring. Like, it's really satisfying to play. And I think a big reason why it feels so good to play is the visuals, like the explosions, like the visual feedback, the over-the-top animations.
It's really colorful as well.
It's like someone opened a bag of Skittles inside my face.
Yeah, but in a good way. Like, the combat is just so dynamic. Like Robert said, I never found myself getting bored of it.
Yeah.
It's the complete opposite to those tedious parts of dialogue.
Yeah, so the only low points of the game really is the Bond episodes. The side quests aren't that interesting. But the good news is you can pretty much skip the side quests because it's a game I never felt like I needed the grind. This was on normal difficulty because the game will actually reward you if you actually strategically use all your abilities at the right time. Like, it really does encourage you to learn how to play this game because if you don't, you will struggle. But if you actually master the game, you'll never have to grind for experience. And it's kind of refreshing to have an RPG that's not very grindy. As I said earlier, this is not a terribly long game. It's like 15 to 20 hours, well, by RPG standards.
For one playthrough, that is.
Yeah. Because you can technically make it up to 30 or 40 hours if you play both characters. But yeah, the Bond episodes, the side quests aren't terribly exciting. And my only other nitpick is the environments do get repetitive. There's not that many locations. But thankfully, you can jump around the place pretty quickly. You just hold up on the D-pad and you can bring up this map where you can teleport to any location.
I think the visuals of the characters, though, were really good. Like, the models look really crisp, and it's almost as if you're watching an anime, essentially, even though it's rendered in 3D.
Yeah. For a JRPG with an anime style, it has very high production values. The character models have a very high polygon count. The animation's very good. However, most of the cutscenes are just still images. I imagine this is a cost-saving measure because the game obviously had a very limited budget, but it still looks really nice because pretty much every cutscene is rendered in real time. Like, there's only like 1% of the cutscenes are like video files, so it looks really super sharp and crisp.
Yeah, I really wish there were more of the fully animated cutscenes because they did look excellent.
They look really amazing. And you've also got the anime style intro when you boot up the game. In fact, they're actually making an anime adaptation.
Yeah, it comes out next week.
Although you can watch the first episode early on the Funimation YouTube channel.
Not sponsored by Funimation.
No, we're not sponsored by them. But yeah, the visuals are very good. It's a very unique rendering style because they've got character models that use cel shading, but you have realistic environments, and it really works very well. It complements the cyberpunk setting because you have this colorful yet gritty aesthetic.
Yeah, I think the characters really pop out from the background. So that combination of art styles surprisingly works quite well.
And the best part is the PS5 and the Series X version both run at 4K 60. It is a full native 4K at 60 frames per second. It looks really sharp.
Yeah, it's super smooth. Like, I played it on my big 4K TV and, like, it looks awesome.
Yeah, they did a really good job of optimizing it. I don't own the other versions of the game, but I did hear the Series S, like the demo, does run at 1440p at 60 frames per second.
That's still pretty good.
Yeah, so it's a game they've really well optimized for both, for various machines, because this game's coming out on ostensibly 7 consoles.
That's nuts.
And PC. There was too many consoles on the market. But, they've done a very good job of optimizing it for both previous and current generation consoles, and I think you'll be pretty pleased with the game regardless of what machine you play it on, although it technically shines the best on the new machines.
Yeah, it's a game I'd definitely recommend checking out, especially if you're an anime fan. You're probably going to enjoy it a lot.
But we didn't mention the amazing soundtrack.
Oh yeah, like the soundtrack is really cool because like it takes so many different genres of music and kind of mashes them together. There's a lot of electronic music. There's kind of jazz in sort of similar style to the music you might have heard in Persona. But then there's a lot of really high tempo tracks like rock and industrial metal that you hear when you're battling. So like it doesn't really get repetitive. and there's music that's going to appeal to pretty much everyone.
You can tell Ben's the music expert. In fact, I actually got him to write the music part of my video review.
Yeah, I love my game soundtracks. Like that is a primary reason why I'll play a video game.
The only other housekeeping is the Xbox version does support smart delivery, so you get both the Xbox One and the Xbox Series version.
Nice.
It automatically supports cross-save. The PS4 disc comes with a free PS5 upgrade. So if you don't own a next-gen console, but you still want to pick up this game, you are entitled to a free upgrade. So, you know, if you want to play this game early, but I do recommend playing on next-gen consoles. I recommend waiting because then the game will be cheaper by then. But if you really need to play it and you still want that safety net you can play on your next-gen consoles, go ahead.
I think it's nice that they give people the option. Like, a lot of people are in a situation where they can't even get their hands on a new console.
Exactly.
So at least they can pick up the game, and then once they do get like a Series X or a PS5, they can either play it again or play it in the best possible way.
So yeah, I think overall, I would recommend this game. Aside from the Bond episodes and the environments getting a bit repetitive, this is a really fun action RPG, and I really do recommend it for people who actually really don't like JRPGs in a sense where they kind of don't like the padding. Like this, this is a JRPG, but without the bad stuff.
Yeah, it'll appeal to people who don't want to put in hundreds and hundreds of hours, but still want a pretty cool sort of anime story
with really good production values.
Wow, I'm so happy.
So I think we'll move on to Ender Lilies, which is a game that was in early access since last year, but the full version has finally come out on Steam, and it's also been released on the Switch, and a version for the Xbox and PlayStation will come out later this year. But Ben's been playing for the last couple of weeks, and I'm jealous that his footage of the boss fights is getting more views than some of my videos.
I put zero effort into that, and somehow each of them has like almost 1,000 views now.
I'm gonna give you some advice to any aspiring YouTubers. Don't put effort into your videos. They will do well.
Nah, Ender Lilies is an interesting one. I first found out about it not through its early access, but it was an indie showcase roundup that Nintendo did a few months back. And just the art style kind of grabbed me.
Full disclosure, Ben was given a review code.
Yeah, so I was sent a review code on PC, and I'm planning to play it on the Switch as well, just to compare. But it's kind of your traditional, I'm going to use the word Metroidvania. I'm sorry.
Oh, my God.
I know Robert dislikes that term.
I don't know. Because look at Mercury Steam, as we mentioned earlier. They've made both Castlevania and Metroid games.
So essentially, it's that kind of action-adventure gameplay where you explore a big sprawling map, and the map is divided into sort of smaller, unique locales. So you play as this little priestess girl, and she actually can't fight at all. She's quite frail, but you can summon the spirits of people to fight alongside you. And if you've ever played Castlevania Aria of Sorrow or Dawn of Sorrow, they're really similar to that because you've got these summons that you can use to your advantage. And it's got a really gothic art style to it. It feels as if you've kind of blended, Dark Souls and Child of Light together.
I was going to kin the visuals more to like a Vanillaware game. That's what it reminded me of. Just the way the characters are really highly detailed and the way it animates. You mentioned the reign of death has killed people.
So like the main part of the plot in the game is that there's just this ceaseless rain. And the rain basically kills anything it touches and corrupts them. So your goal is to investigate this huge kingdom. You've got to purify the souls of the people that have been corrupted by the rain.
So it's basically Canberra.
Well...
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, there's a few corrupt people down there, isn't there? And once you purify them, you actually gain their soul, and then they fight alongside you. So there's, I think it's like 30 plus different souls that you can recruit. And each of them is basically like a different weapon. you equip 3 of them at once, and then that becomes your attacks throughout the game. So it's really customizable.
You mentioned the music was done by some indie group.
Yeah, I think they're called Millie. So they're a Japanese indie band. And like the music is just so melancholy. Like it makes me sad just listening to it. But it's quite an entrancing soundtrack. It feels like I don't know, a little bit like a fairy tale, but just a lot sadder. And the gameplay itself, I found it to be really enjoyable. Takes like 10 to 15 hours to finish the game, so it's not huge.
Not like Hollow Knight.
No, like I would compare it to Hollow Knight though. There's a lot of gameplay mechanics that are really similar. You even sit at a bench to save. And
well, that was based on Eco.
Oh, was it? Oh, I guess it was.
Yeah, Eco, you sat down to save.
Yeah, well, it's not just Hollow Knight where you sit down to save then. It's also Ender Lilies. And if you're a fan of Hollow Knight or like Symphony of the Night as well, one of the most revered Castlevania games.
That didn't sell very well.
It didn't, but now it's worth like $500 plus. So instead of spending $500 on Symphony of the Night, how about you spend $25 on Ender Lilies instead? Like I would really recommend picking up this game or at least having a look into it if you're a fan of Castlevania.
No, I enjoy reading your review. I just think it was cool that the sound design was done by the same guy who did Rez.
Oh, like if there's anyone out there that's good with sound effects, it's going to be the person who made them for Rez.
Yeah. He also did the background music for Nightshade, one of my favorite games on the PS2. I showed Ben that game because the first level, you're on top of a stealth bomber, like firing ninjas flying in.
Badass.
Yeah. A little bit off topic, but I wanted to mention that game because I love that game.
No, that's all right. Yeah.
But it is pretty cool how Metroidvania as a genre has become so huge because back in the 90s, Symphony of the Night bombed. Like Castlevania 64 outsold it despite the fact that the 64 had a smaller install base.
That makes me so sad. Like Symphony of the Night is one of the best games ever made.
But do you know anyone who actually owned the game back in the day?
Well, I was like 5 or 6 years old, so not really.
I was older, but I knew tons of people who had PlayStations and none of them owned that game.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't even aware of the game existed until I think 10 years later, until I got Dracula X Chronicles on the PSP because that came with it.
That's actually how I played it initially as well. So it's a phenomenal game, and I can see that Ender Lilies has taken a lot of inspiration from it, and it's not like too on the nose. It's not a rip-off at all.
It's not like the Record of Lotus War game I discussed where it was very clearly they ripped it off.
But I mean, it's a really popular genre now, and there are so many great indie games that have that same sort of gameplay feel to it. So if you like how these games play, I do suggest you look into Ender Lilies.
All right, so we'll wrap things up. And it's time for me to talk for once. just sitting here chilling. I'm going to talk about Guilty Gear Strive. So
let's rock.
Heaven or hell. Let's rock. Mankind. You've just seen that.
Like, what does that even mean? There's so much just random banter in the game.
So they blame the beast.
What?
So Guilty Gear has been around since the late 90s on the PS1, which was a console that was not renowned for 2D fighters back in the day. The Sega Saturn was just was more suitable for 2D games. Like X-Men versus Street Fighter is a good example of that because the PS1 version was heavily cut back compared to the Saturn version. But Guilty Gear was one of the few examples of a really good 2D game, along with Symphony of the Night, that really shined on the PS1. And not only did the game look amazing, but had like a really heavy metal aesthetic in terms of its music and its aesthetics. Like it was very gritty and violent.
It is such an edgy game, but it's edgy and it knows it.
Yeah. They've toned down the edge definitely over time. Like it's definitely not as over the top as the first game, but the first game, it really does hold up for a 2D game on the PS1, and it's really one of history's most deepest, most complex fighting games. And controversially, Strive does slightly dumb it down a bit, but I wouldn't say it's super dumbed down. Like you can't press A for awesome to win. Like, you can't just mash a button. Like, you can do that. Like, you can set the difficulty to the lowest difficulty and probably just mash your buttons, which is fine. I think there's nothing wrong with people doing that, just having fun, like looking at the aesthetics. But because Guilty Gear Strive is a gorgeous game.
It looks great.
Yeah, so it's built with Unreal Engine 4, and they're built on the framework they developed for Guilty Gear XR and Dragon Ball Fighters, where they just overlay a ton of cell shading to create this uncanny illusion that the game is almost 2D. Like, it looks incredible. Like, you can definitely see the polygons, but it's as close as you can get to having a 3D game that looks like a 2D game.
And the characters' designs as well, from what I've seen, look like they've really exaggerated too.
Yeah, and this visual style actually encourages you to actually learn the game, like learn how to pull off all the special moves, because they're so over the top and cool looking. You just want to see more of the animations.
My favorite special move is where the little girl, I think her name is May, she summons a whale out of nowhere just to slam your opponent.
Yeah, I was playing online with Super Jump Reviews, and I showed him that movie. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
It's so good.
And it's a good thing I brought up Super Jump Reviews. He's an American YouTuber. He lives in New Jersey.
Go check him out.
Yeah, he makes good content. We played online to test out the netcode. Now, it uses rollback code, but I should debunk myths about rollback code. Is by virtue of using rollback code does not make your online smooth. Street Fighter V uses rollback code, but not a very good implementation. But Guilty Gear Strive, they put a ton of work into the netcode, and the lag is pretty much non-existent. Like, me and Super Jump, we played an hour of the online, and then we saw no lag. Like, it was beautiful.
And that's so important for a fighting game as well. Like, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time in online lobbies, and that needs to be really smooth.
Having said that, the online lobby system is horrible. Arc System Works has this weird obsession with making these stylized, over-the-top, needlessly complicated lobby systems. So it's like this dollhouse aesthetic where you have this little avatar and you go up and fight people, which may seem cool. I imagine they're trying to replicate the feeling of going to a Japanese arcade. But honestly, I just want an option where I can just match up with someone or invite my friend instantly and we can just immediately play.
Yeah, like that, it makes sense.
Like, it was a pain in the butt just to set up a match with Super Jump. We spent like 10 to 20 minutes trying to get a match going between us. And it's just unnecessary. Like, it really isn't needed at all. Like, the netcode is amazing, but they really need to get rid of that elaborate lobby system. Yeah, it looks cute, but it really isn't necessary.
Just to plug myself for a moment, if you want to know a bit about netcode, because I had absolutely no idea what it even was. There's actually an article over on my site that explains what netcode is and why rollback is so much more important.
It also has a review of Guilty Gear Strive.
Yeah, you can go check it out.
So yeah, overall, I don't really recommend the game at launch, really. So you only get 15 characters. They have announced a Season Pass 1, which implies there's going to be more Season Pass.
Is Sephiroth going to be there?
Nah. He would be very expensive to get. So my recommendation with this game, even though I got a review code, I still say to people, unless you really want to get into the online, I say you should just wait to get the game later when the game's really cheap and you get all the DLC characters, because they've announced the roadmap. So you're basically paying full price for the worst version of the game, to quote Total Biscuit.
Yeah, like I imagine they're going to iron things out and add a bit more content. So it makes sense, unless you're super passionate about Guilty Gear.
Because, yeah, go on.
It's probably not an issue to wait a little bit.
Yeah, because there isn't a ton of single-player content, so you just got the arcade mode, where you fight 8 characters. There's the mission mode, where basically it's just like a long tutorial where you have to pull off all these moves, and it's a good way to learn how to play the game. And then there's the survival mode, and that's basically it. There's a story mode, but it's not a conventional story mode, so it's not like a Mortal Kombat where, there's cutscenes, then you fight. It literally is just cutscenes. You just sit back and you watch 5 hours of cutscenes.
I did read that there was 5 hours of like fully animated cutscenes, but is there no fighting in between?
No. They did this in Guilty Gear XR as well. They omitted all the fighting because The creative director stated that, it gave them more flexibility in telling a story because they didn't have to worry about, pairing up fights.
Yeah.
But having said that, with Strive story mode, it really throws you into deep end. If you have not played the story mode in XR Sign and Revelator, it just throws you into the deep end. Now, thankfully, Arc System Works has uploaded on their YouTube channel all the cutscenes from the 2 XR games.
Oh.
And they also have a digest comic book that you can briefly get the grips with the story.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore and backstory into Guilty Gear.
Yeah,
and I know nothing about it.
Yeah, they throw you into the deep end. So don't jump into the Strive story mode and expect you can understand what's going on, because you won't. So yeah, with the story mode, it's all done in real time. So admittedly, it does look like a cheap CG anime, but it's all rendered in 4K and looks amazingly sharp, because most anime runs at 720p. So to see anime character models that sharp is incredible. Now, I'm referring to the PS5 and the PC version running at 4K. The PS4 Pro version's 1080p. The original PS4 runs the game at I think it was 800p.
Yeah.
But the 4K presentation on the PS5 and PC looks amazing. And the PC port's not half bad, My only nitpick with it doesn't support arbitrary resolutions, but it does support 4K. But no support for ultra wide screens if you have one. But one positive about the PC port is the controller support. I threw basically every controller I had it, and it supported all of them seamlessly.
That's cool.
And if you plug in a PlayStation 4 or PS5 controller, it will actually show PlayStation prompts.
Oh, nice. And did you use a fight stick for it? Or?
Yeah, so my Switch fight stick over there,
Yeah.
it has both a Switch and PC mode, and it recognized both of them.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so it will support DirectX controllers, direct input controllers, PlayStation, Switch, every controller you can throw at it.
Yeah.
It's supported, and it was pretty impressive, I say. It's a pretty good PC port, because Arc System Works PC ports have been a bit of a mixed bag in the past. Like, for example, the Kill la Kill PC port, you had to use a hex editor to run the game at 4K because it was locked at 1080p. You had to get into the executable and rewrite some of the code to run it at 4K.
That's so lazy.
Yeah, so it's nice. It's really refreshing to have a good PC port for them. It's not perfect. I would like to see support for arbitrary resolutions, but I'm very impressed. The only downside is the PC version does not have cross online with PlayStation users. Now, PS4 and PS5 users can play online together, and the PS4 disc does come with a free PS5 upgrade, which is cool.
Yeah.
And it does support save transfers. In fact, you can actually transfer your save from the PS5 back to the PS4.
I'm not sure why you would do that, but maybe if you were borrowing a console, I guess.
It'd be handy, because most PS5 games upgrades only allow you to transfer the save to the PS5, but you can't go backwards.
Yeah.
This is why Xbox's Smart Delivery is much more versatile, because it just does it automatically. It just automatically jumps between the two consoles.
Yeah.
So it's sold on both PS5 and PC, but I assume the PS5 version will have the stronger online community.
Yeah.
But as I said earlier, unless you really care about the online, there's no reason to buy it now. Because fighting games have pretty much trained us to wait, because, you basically pay for a GINT version. So, yeah, even though I got a review code, I still can't recommend it at launch. Unless you really need to play online, just wait another year or two. There'll be a special edition with everything for $20.
Yeah, I'm not